Have you ever thought why eating a bowl of ice cream or playing video games for hours is much easier than going out for a run or sitting down to read a book? Well, it all comes down to one hormone in our brains. It's called dopamine. What is dopamine? Dopamine is a neurotransmitter that is wired in our brains and is associated with the reward system in our brain. It's basically give us the ability to be motivated towards an activity because we're seeking the reward after it. It was made and structured way back then when we were hunters and gatherers. It was giving us the ability to be motivated towards going out all day to hunt, knowing that we're going to have a prey to eat at the end of the day. And based on that reward, we have dopamine all day, which is motivation, or looking out for the reward, which is desire. Now, how serious is dopamine? I'm not a scientist or anything, but I read a study that they did on rats. First, they gave the rats a trigger, a button that they can press on, and as soon as they press on the button, they wired electricity or something to hit the dopamine receptors on their brains to release more dopamine. And throughout this experiment, they gave them food and water. But imagine that the rats kept pressing that button forever until they fell on their backs of tiredness. They never ate, they never drank, they only wanted to press that button. Now, on the other end of the study, they basically removed or disabled the dopamine receptors in their brain, and they gave them food and water as well. Now, the rats won't even get up and go towards their food or water. They just had no motivation whatsoever. Now, they would eat. If they were fed, they would eat, but they wouldn't get up. They didn't have the motivation to get up to that food, which basically summarizes the whole thing. But I understand that this is extreme. It's not like that for us, but it gives us the idea of how dopamine works with our brains. You're probably asking, how is this all linked to me or to this modern world that we're living? I can tell you this, that every activity that you do in life is linked to this neurotransmitter. It basically controls the motivation and the desire for the reward after that activity. And in this life, we have so many dopamine hitters around us, just like that trigger that we're giving to the rats, such as social media, sugar, bad food, video games. Every addiction that you can possibly think is linked to dopamine. But the problem is that those activities give us unnatural amounts of dopamine that we're not supposed to have as many. So when we wake up and find social media at the fastest pace, or we drink and we eat sugar all day, play video games, and just keep ourselves entertained, that way our dopamine receptors or our brain get desensitized of dopamine. So what does that mean? It basically means that having way more than anticipated of dopamine levels all the time, which is as soon as we wake up, we check the social media, which is instantly giving us high amounts of dopamine. The brain won't even bother with low dopamine activities, such as running, reading a book, working on your business, doing anything that you admire or that you look up to. So this is not natural, this level of dopamine that we're getting or we're feeding our brain every day. That's how dangerous it is. And that's why low dopamine activities such as running or any beneficial things that will be beneficial to you towards your goal or towards your vision, because you know that it's good for you and you know that you want to do this, but it's just hard, or it doesn't compare to sitting down watching a movie or binge watching a favorite series that you have. It doesn't compare. It just doesn't. So how do we fix this? Well, in order to fix this, there is a state called homeostasis. And I'll put that in the bottom. Homeostasis is basically returning our body and our brain to the natural levels of it doesn't say dopamine, but I think it's linked to dopamine as well. In order to reset that level, because we're just used to high, we can't comprehend low. It's boring and it's nothing. Why would I do that? Because I can have so much more of dopamine. Now we fix this and we reach homeostasis by trying to eliminate most activities, if not all, that they are giving us those dopamine hits. The lower unnatural dopamine in our brains gets, the easier for our brains to start doing the low dopamine ones, the boring ones. And that way we can have a trained brain that will be accepting of lower dopamine and boring stuff to do, which is technically the goal. I know it's complicated, but just know this. The easier we make it on our brains to do those hard things, the happier the process will be. Hopefully, this message helped you, and I'll see you in the next one.